Good afternoon. My name is John Tilford. I am the curator of collections at Oglethorpe University Museum of Art. It is my privilege to welcome you all here today for this wonderful conversation between Oglethorpe University senior Taylor Roberts and Miss Shanequa Gay, prominent visual contemporary artist here in Atlanta. The conversation is going to revolve around two particular works by Miss Gay, which are currently on view at Oglethorpe University Museum of Art. And those works will be made available for viewing by way of a virtual tour, which will soon be published. And we encourage you to visit by way of that tour. Taylor Roberts began her career at Oglethorpe University in 2017. Shortly after her arrival, she established herself as an intern in the curatorial department of Oglethorpe University Museum of Art. Shortly thereafter, she was awarded a prestigious undergraduate curatorial fellowship at the Mellon Foundation, where her work was conducted with our friends and neighbors at the High Museum here in Atlanta. In 2018 and 2019, Ms. Roberts led a student initiative with classmates Brad Furco and Jordan Madison, in which works of art were acquired for the museum's permanent collection, which were more in keeping with the rich diversity of the student body at Oglethorpe University, in the hopes that students, when visiting the university museum, would see themselves and their own rich diversity reflected in the works of art on view. Shanequa Gay completed her Bachelor's of Fine Arts degree in 2015, graduating summa cum laude from the Savannah College of Art and Design. In 2019, Ms. Gay completed her Master's of Fine Arts degree from Georgia State University. Her works are found in the private collections of Samuel L. Jackson and Mrs. Michelle Obama, amongst others. Oglethorpe University Museum of Art is among one of the first museums in the country to acquire works by Ms. Gay. Recent exhibitions of her work have been held at Anno Art Gallery and the Hammonds House Museum, both of Atlanta, Georgia. As recently as August of this year, Ms. Gay was appointed an Arts and Social Justice Fellow at Emory University. It is my privilege to welcome both Taylor Roberts and Shanequa Gay.
Well, hey, it's,
Hi, how are you?
Wonderful to see you.
Very good to see you. How are you?
You know, I'm good. I'm happy to be back in Atlanta and back in school. I'm feeling busy, so things are going well on my end. How about you?
I'm good. So did you leave? You left?
So I went home in March after the pandemic. I went home to Chicago, stayed with my parents for a little bit, and then came back here to Atlanta for the beginning of the semester, for the beginning of the school year.
Taylor, you're a Chicagoan. I didn't know.
I am, yes. And you're a Kanye fan, so we are.
I am a Kanye fan. I love him for the good, the bad, and indifferent.
Exactly. I'm with you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Do you feel good to start?
Sure. Absolutely.
Well, my first question for you is, how has the pandemic affected your practice? Has there been any change in the way that you've been creating your work?
How has the pandemic affected my practice? I would say at the beginning, I was really concerned. At the beginning, I really didn't begin to, I would say, take this seriously, if you will. Probably until about the first or second week. I've been at my studio with my son and began to see my studio mates kind of like packing up work, putting it in their car, having statements that they would be working from home. And so then I was like, well, maybe this is a little bit more serious than I'm giving it credit for. And then having conversations with friends, my friends were like, well, Shanequa, you're an artist and, people aren't currently working. If people aren't working, that means they're not spending money on art. And if they're not spending money on art, how are you going to eat? And you're going to have to get a job and you're going to be poor and you're going to be put out of your house. Like, right? They just went into like all of the manic things that I, as a, by and large, pretty optimistic and jovial person, I wasn't even thinking like that. That wasn't even at the fore of my space, my headspace at the time. And also at the time I was working, and also at the time I had, I want to say about 3 or 4 exhibitions already up and already going. And, people began to move to the online platform. So I was like, well, people will still be able to see my work, right? Even in the online space. But as we were kind of shut in for maybe about a month and a half to 2 months, and I was having like a break and possibly a breakdown because I'm a busybody. I'm a do too much person. Work began to pick up. I actually was busier, have been busier in the midst of a pandemic than I was at the previous part of the year, and possibly even at the end of last year. And by and large, I was hoping to have a place of calm down, and my friends who are also like throwing like these negative, being negative Nancy's, were like, I hope you're using COVID to calm down. I'm like, well, which one is it? Should I use the pandemic to calm down, or should I be very concerned about my work and my practice as an artist? But I've consistently been working, be it commissions, doing murals, or submitting proposals for upcoming exhibitions. I've actually been really busy, of which I'm grateful. And I attribute a good bit of that to social unrest, along with the pandemic. So there's, outside of us being in, the end of the world, there have been a lot of other things that have happened that have, caused for attention to my body of work, my practice as an artist. That was a really long answer.
No, it's a really great answer. I kind of have a question going on that line of thought. I think it makes sense that, yes, like during a time of civil unrest, many people will reach out and try to support people who belong to the community that is experiencing some sort of harmful or painful incidents within their community. But I was also wondering if you had a thought or any idea as to why so many people have turned towards art in this time. I mean, in a time of civil unrest and during this pandemic. If there's anything about us as, humans, as base level, that's just bringing us back to art at this moment.
There's a really great book, I believe it's The Healing Art of Africa by Mellon Undergraduate. And one of the things that and I may be chopping up his name horribly, but one of the things he talks about is artists are sacred. They really are. Artists are sacred. And especially from an indigenous mindset, we're like the heartbeat of the community. And actually, an artist's work is a representation of its community. And we create spirits. So basically, we're putting our spirits on walls, in songs, in dance. We are like the heartbeat of the community. And so when we are in places of social unrest, civil unrest, we look to the heartbeat. That's the most peaceful way I can look at why people look to artists, is because we represent the spiritual space, we represent the sacred, we represent an answer. A lot of times artists have a tendency to be prophetic, speak about the future and speak about what is, and also speak about the past. Yeah, so I believe that's why people look to the arts.
Thank you. I think so too. We're kind of going to shift a little bit here. But I was wondering if you could speak to creating La Pietá. What was your process in conceptualizing the image and creating it?
Sure. At the time, I was working on a body of work or a series called the Fair Game Project. And mostly I was showing being very literal, being very didactic, and, my thought process of what was happening was specifically the Black male body and seeing it as a hybrid between deer and male, this kind of hunted figure that was also godlike. Right. So when you're speaking to the language of hybridity, I'm borrowing from centuries of narratives of being godlike, of taking on the animal and the spirit of an animal and combining it with man. So you'll find that in Egyptian tombs, you'll find that with African masks. So I'm borrowing from antiquity. And one of the things I wanted to relay was what I felt like wasn't being relayed was the spirit of the mother. Like, how do mothers feel about their sons constantly being sacrificed in the streets of America? Not just from a police violence standpoint, but all of the things that are kind of heaped onto the Black body, the Black young male body. You're always hearing what's happening to them, but what about the mothers? What about Tamir Rice's mother? What about Trayvon Martin's mother? What is it with this consistency, this language of the needing to sacrifice all of the time? And a familiar narrative of a son being sacrificed is that of Mary and her son Christ. Whether you believe the story to be true or not, it is one that is integrated into our cultures globally, and it is told in a myriad of ways. But I'm interested in telling the story from a contemporary standpoint and speaking to a couple of things. So the image is actually my mother and my son, who I believe at the time was maybe 14. I think my son was about 14. He would have had to be because he was still malleable at that point where, you know, we could still get him to do stuff and he wasn't too cool to do it. Dichotomies, you know, some, you know, a baby boomer generation, a Generation Z, repeating the same narratives. Like, this isn't foreign to my mother. And yet this is a story that my son knows. Why is it like this? And why hasn't this changed? Also speaking to our loss. So I lost my brother to a car accident, not to police violence, but my mother looking at her grandson and not seeing him as a loss, right? But then also speaking to the endearment of a mother looking at her son. And just this repeated language of loss in our communities and wanting to portray that in a contemporary way. And I hope that wasn't too long. Okay.
I think in that same line of thought, in pieces like the Fair Game Project and La Pietá, you reference police brutality and the general endangerment of Black men. How have the uprisings of this summer affected the way you think of these works and affected you?
I stopped doing the Fair Game Project because it's such weighty subject matter. And I was dealing with a lot of outrage fatigue and needing to move away from a place of, you know, possibly being grasped by something I don't have control over, or at least I don't feel like I have control over. The whole purpose in turning to the Fair Game Project was, how do I deal with this that I'm constantly seeing every day, using media, you know, as my fodder. And if you're constantly reading and using that as, you know, a part of your practice, it can be really depressing. And as a mother, it was putting me in a place of feeling hopeless for my son, and I don't want that. Like I said, I'm pretty much a jovial and very optimistic character. But looking for new ways to tell our stories, which is why I kind of turned to the Devout series and upliftment of Black women, and being, you know, the creating counter narratives, new narratives in which we have control. And what has happened over the course of this year And we'll start with Breonna Taylor first because she is one who died at the top of this year, and was overlooked and not seen for a while because of the pandemic. Then we look at George Floyd and Rashard Brooks, right? This constant, how is it that we have this in the middle of a pandemic, I think is one of the things that baffles me. How is it we made time to oppress Black people and to kill them in the middle of a pandemic? And I'm not sure that people aren't now just operating out of tradition. And I know that's uncomfortable language and not popular, but it would seem it is ritualistic to do this now. It would seem that the Black body feels like an offering at this point, but an offering to whom and why? And so it's hard to see this because by and large, globally, we all are dealing with a pandemic. And by and large, we all should be coming together as human beings and trying to figure out how to deal with the pandemic, not how to hurt or wound or hunt one another or to kill a woman in her sleep. You know, I understand that there are a lot of logistics and laws and policies in place that keeps us from being in a place of just bringing what we know to be wrong to a place of justice. But at some point in time, we should be a bit over it, right? Like, just how is it that we are in the 21st century and we're still operating on antiquated notions of humanity? Like, that's old. You can't say that you're a modern culture or modern people. You're still operating on old world thought processes. If you don't do morals, cool, we can do science. Science says we're all human. Science says we're the first people. And so, you know, it's exhausting and it's exasperating to think that we're still here, because I would like to move on to other things, and I'm sure a lot of other people would too. The thing that gave me hope, though, and I think it was maybe George Floyd, because we've had so many, but the thing that gave me hope was it was almost like people had a light bulb moment, uncomfortably so, when George passed away. I'm almost in tears, but to see how many people came out and marched. And it wasn't just like Black people, and it wasn't just like a Black Lives Matter thing. It was like, you know, the whole globe was done. The whole globe was upset. And, you know, I hate that a body had to be sacrificed in order for us to get to that place. But it said that it's not just Black people that care about this. And it's not just Black people that are tired. Like, everybody is. And how do we change that? And how do we get to a different space? And so that gave me hope. And that moved me, like I'm doing now, to tears. Because, like, people are, you know, we're over it. We're really over it. And as much hate as people try to spew and say that, you know, we don't like each other because of skin color, by and large, seeing people out like that said, that's not so, and it's not true. And you have generations of people from all races, from all creeds and backgrounds that are tired of this. And we want to see something different happen. And so if people call me for my work because they want to advocate through art, I'm present for it. I'm not going to say, oh, well, you're only calling me because it's a civil unrest. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with your why. Because if you're making space and room for Black women artists, you are advocating and you are resisting. And I'm for people who would like to utilize my work as a form of resistance. You're making me cry, Taylor. You didn't say you were gonna make me cry.
This is not my intention at all. But you were making me think. I think this whole summer, the protests were a sort of community that I have never felt before.
Right.
And were truly something special. And to know that I could feel that in my city, in my one protest that I went to that one day, while someone else on the other side of the world is out there championing the same cause that I am, was something amazing, was something phenomenal. And like you said, it's so painful that we have to lose something in order to feel that.
Right.
But it's something that is unlike anything else. It brings me to tears as well. I understand. Kind of back on the Pietá, I have a question that pertains to the composition of the image. So it depicts an immensely tragic scene, yet we see some soft pinks, especially in the mother's shawl that graces the top of her head. And it's also dispersed throughout the young man's body. And to me, this was kind of a little play on this is Shanequa's optimism right in the canvas. But I was wondering what choices you made in the palette of La Pietà, and what those colors potentially signify for you.
Yeah, by and large, it's red, white, and blue. There is a language of patriotism to say that, it's symbolic in saying that we're a part of this cloth as well, right? We're part of the cloth, we're part of the ground, we're part of the building of this nation, and our citizenship is always kind of like, in the sways, and using red, white, and blue was just an important part of the palette. So I didn't feel like I needed to clothe the mother in a flag. I felt like I could speak that patriotism through the work, and then also to relay softness, which is something historically Black women have not always been afforded when we are, previously depicted, right? Kind of elegance, a softness to my mom. And again, just speaking to her humanity, and doing my best to use color to speak to that endearment, softness, elegance to a mother. And then looking at my son, I believe he's wearing a blue sweatshirt, blue pants, and this kind of drips of red that by and large could symbolize blood, sacrifice, and giving up of oneself. Blue is a consistent throughout my work. My family swears blue is my favorite color, but it is green. And it's hard. That's a hard sell if I got these blue earrings on and this blue. That's a hard sell, but
the blue jacket as well.
Blue jacket, yeah. It's a hard sell, but I promise that green is my favorite color. But blue, a separate, symbolizing spirit, symbolize calm, and symbolize peace. So there are a couple of plays I'm having and conversations I'm having there with color.
Wonderful, thank you. You kind of touched on your mother and how she plays in La Pietà, and I want to go into generally what mothering is in your work, because we see it often. And I was wondering what your depiction of Black motherhood is in your life, as well as the way it appears within your work.
So we all think this, we all believe this, right? I have the best mother in the world. Most people, by and large, even when your mother isn't the best in the world, you will say she is, because our our society almost like villainizes us if we say anything horrible about our parents. But like I literally do have a great and supportive mom. The reason that I'm a creative is because I have a great and supportive mom. But even previous to her, I have had a lot of mothers in my life. I lived to be able to see, my great grandmother, my grandmother, my mother, myself, like just generations and generations of women, and just remembering as a young person, Black, girthy, swarthy Black women just representing strength to me, and representing like this otherness. I don't know how to describe how they just seem right. So young boys grow up believing, like Superman or He-Man or like heroes and all of this. I just grew up thinking Black women were like superheroes. Like I did. There's nothing. I mean, this woman can make me well by simply kissing my boo-boo, right? Or she makes me feel amazing by feeding me, the icing from the cake, right? It's just something. And while it seems small from a childlike perspective, it's like this person is superhuman. Like she's amazing. To hear my family, the women in my family pray or to well out to God, right? So spirituality flows deeply through my family, and just remembering the excitement of going to homecoming. So my mother is from Dallas, Georgia, very kind of backwoods country town, especially when I was growing up. Like it was a one lane road to get there. And using this one lane road to get to this all white church that sits on a hill, and hearing, family members or women in the community belt loud in the choir. Like I just remember just being supremely moved by Black women and the way that they cared for and mothered me as a child. And I'm like, how do I relate this in my work? How do I talk about how the importance of this in my work? How do I relay that feeling in my work? Black motherhood is the makeup of, again, this nation, right? When you think about the sacrifice of Black women who have left fields to work in houses, to care for other people's families, and then find strength to come back home to care for your own. To have men who have left, either left by will, left by jail, left, because they've been killed, to take it upon themselves to still be heads of households and still like they're like magicians. And I'm not saying all women don't have that. I can only speak from my perspective. I just feel like Black women are, there's just this magicianship to them. There's just this, goodness, grace with them. And then, for myself to become a mother, I laugh and joke all the time. I can laugh and joke now. Like when I became a mother, while it was super exciting and amazing, my mother was so afeared. And she was like, you don't even like children. How are you going to be a mother? And she was right. I did not like children. I was super like, my husband at the time, I was super excited about being a mom, but she was right. So I'm the kid who had to share my babysitting money with my brother because I would be paid to babysit, but my brother actually did the babysitting because I did not like children. My cousins have nightmare stories of me being their babysitter and just being like the worst human alive because I didn't like children. But by becoming a mother, I fell in love with children, and I love being my son's mom and understanding my own self, what our superhuman strength relays. And so I'm always trying to figure out cool and inventive ways to talk about the magicianship of women because they are godlike. Yeah.
Perfectly going into our next question. In First Station of the Cross, you depict Christ as a Black woman. What motivated you to make this choice?
Oh my gosh, it was a choice I had to fight about. I did. When I was commissioned by All Saints to do the first station, or to do one of the stations of the cross, I immediately thought about my work. I thought about my reference photos and images I had done of Black women, and already looking for, ways to speak or place women, Black women, into places of sainthood and holiness. Right? And that was my first reference point. I didn't even have a second guess. I didn't even think, well, I'm gonna have to, get a reference for, like a Black male Jesus or something like that. I immediately thought about portraying women. And so when I when I initially submitted my pieces, I got some pushback. And they were like, well, this is lovely and beautiful. We want traditional images of Christ. We feel some type of way with having our parish to bend down and pray to Black women as Christ. And I felt some kind of way that I was receiving pushback about that. I am a preacher's kid. My mother's a pastor. And so spirituality and the understanding of even religion, while I don't consider myself a religious person, I am a very spiritual person. And I'm also a very argumentative person if need. And so, right, I won't say argumentative, I'll say debate. I love to debate. And if I feel strongly about something, you gotta fight on your hands, right? Because I come from a long line of people who love to debate and who also all think they are right? A long line of family members who think they're right. And so my thing was, hey, if I'm not going to be able to portray Black women as, these figures, as Pontius Pilate and his cronies, as well as Christ being portrayed as a woman, then I don't want to do this. Right? Because Christ who lives in me, right? So if you understand the language of scripture, it says that we all are Christ. And the Spirit of God lies within all of us, and that we all are a portrayal of Him. And so within modernity, I have every right, as far as I'm concerned, to be able to portray Christ, the Spirit of Christ, this kind of staging. And, for me, it's the language of kind of actors, right? So we have had Christ portrayed to us inaccurately for centuries, right? Even though it says that Christ was one of bronze skin and woolly hair, we have been, given a Christ that is a bit vanilla, a bit hippie, a bit, cool. We've been given a cool vanilla hippie as Christ. That is definitely not the literal portrayal of Him, and we've had that for centuries. So why not Christ as a Black woman? I don't see that wrong, right? So when he was asking me to internalize what it would feel like for an all-white parish to bow to a Black woman as Christ, I was thinking, well, how do you think it has felt for Black people to have to bow to a hippie, cool Christ for centuries? That's inaccurate. It's an inaccurate portrayal. And so the argument has always been, well, it doesn't matter what color Christ is. And so if it doesn't matter the color, then it also does not matter the gender. And so, really excited that they were cool with my pushback. I'm really excited that they offered up, the opportunity to be open in allowing me to portray Christ as a Black woman. And understanding what they meant about, just this literal imagery. But I just felt really strongly that who has sacrificed more than Black women in this nation, who has given up the most, right? And so we're moving away from, this kind of literal portrayal of Christ, and we're talking about something symbolic. For me, as Christ, for Christ to live is for me to die. For this nation to stand has meant for Black women to sacrifice and to give themselves up daily and constantly. And so, yeah, I feel like I've had a lot of work that I've just felt really strongly about and fell in love with and all the other stuff, but the station, probably about the dopest thing I've done. Mostly because I had a debate about something I felt really passionate about. And then, like I said, being a preacher's kid and being able to portray ones that I feel like are just as godlike as any was really exciting for me.
Beautiful. Wonderful. So through your work and who you are, your faith in Christianity is evident, and a significant aspect of that is practicing, or a significant aspect of practicing faith is ritual. Mm-hmm. Could you talk about the ritual within First Station of the Cross? I'm also curious about rituals that you have that play within your life, whether they pertain to your practice or to your faith practice.
Let me see. I don't know if there's a ritual actually portrayed in the First Station of the Cross. I know that is Christ being addressed by Pontius, right? Kind of being told, hey, I got to give you up. I got to sacrifice you, right? In regards to the narrative, but around this Pontius figure that holds a watermelon. Watermelon for me as a representation of, again, sacrifice and as well as holiness. Watermelon, when you talk about the Holy Spirit a lot of times is symbolic of water, and using the watermelon as an image of the Holy Spirit. The women, I believe, have like these kind of, amazing kind of gilets, head wraps, scarves, and metallics, golds, coppers. One just talking about, just the royalty of Black women, reimagining what that would look like. And I just feel like they would definitely probably be way more decked out than I have them, but really just kind of speaking to their saintliness, their royalty, these judges of the Christ figure, and the Christ figure is not clothed in this kind of amazing royal garb, but comes as she is, without the need of all of this draping. But ritual, when I think about ritual, when I think about offering, when I think about, this kind of constants that I find within the Christian church, I'm always interested in the study of spirituality with Black people, and I'm just very much convinced that while we may have taken upon ourselves possibly Catholicism or Christianity, I think we only did that in name, not in practice. I feel like we very much did a really good job of actually keeping our spirituality under the guise of Christianity and Catholicism. When you look at the practices of Yoruba or Haitian voodoo, you see the same practices within the Black church, right? This kind of praise, worship. I'm convinced that our speaking in tongue is actually our speaking in our native tongue, one that we don't understand, that we don't know. You just see these kind of constants show up, and I'm like, well, where have I seen this before? Right? It's a lot of familiarity here, and it's like it's not actually separate. It actually goes together as a constant living organism. And coming from, I grew up in a Pentecostal church that was mixed. But my family within, our realm of pastors and preachers and teachers, they very much practiced a different type of, I would say, spirituality, right? So prayer and deliverance, speaking in tongues, praise and worship, the falling out, the laying on of hands, Black church. Yeah. What we know here to be Black church, elsewhere, like I said, is considered like, Yoruba practices, and you'll find that in, spiritual practices of voodoo. Like it's a lot of stuff that's the same. And so, the way that we villainize one another in regards to spirituality, I find to be problematic, because where we're trying to create divisions, there's actually a lot of similarities happening. And so, because I come from a place of that kind of spirituality and belief, I feel like I've just kind of translated ritual into my body of work, and looking for different symbolisms. And so whether I'm using watermelon or masking, I'm looking for ways to kind of give that up, the language of prayer, the language of honoring holiness. I still feel like I'm speaking to that, right? So when I'm putting the women in all white, I think I kind of spoke about earlier about going to homecoming, where I get to see all the the first ladies or the elders of the family, or everybody had to come to homecoming and dressed in white, especially women, all white gloves, all of this language of purity and what's considered holy, cloaking oneself in holiness, looking for ways to kind of get to that in my body of work.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Still lingering on First Station of the Cross, in both that piece and the Pietà, we see late 15th century European influences throughout the imagery. I was wondering what response you were hoping to invoke in viewers by including these references.
Well, like borrowing, I love to borrow from, this kind of old world culture and tradition. One, because it's familiar. So we have been bombarded, most of us, with these images, especially if you're a student of the arts. We've been bombarded with these images. I know, oh my God. When I was at SCAD, I swear I took like 15 Italian history courses. Oh my God. Because they beat it in your head, right? The importance of these masters. And so taking this mastery and relaying it into the contemporary, and, maybe changing the characters, changing the thespians, the players on the stage, and how, and giving them center and agency. Well, what if we said this, as opposed to that? As opposed to the thing that you know the most, and looking for ways to translate that into the now. What if it's this instead of that? But using new characters, just kind of looking for ways to give us agency in old narratives, and looking for ways to counter the narrative that was that you can. We have permission. Giving ourselves permission, and by and large, it's not enough images out here portraying us in those positions. Because again, if you actually read the Bible, which most people don't, most of those people are people of color, right? When we're thinking about religious imagery, and what's being said throughout our Bible, it's like, well, you begin to read the Bible, it's like, well, where did these random Ethiopians come from? And then if you look at where they're speaking about, it's like, well, Cush, all those people are Black. Egyptians, most of those people are Black up until a certain, period. Like, where is this? Actually, we have space here. We have agency here. Our narrative has not been told. The mastery of the brush did not include us in the narrative. So how do we become masters of those narratives? How do we put ourselves there? How do we portray Black women, not as servants only, but of royalty, and not just African royalty, that we are part of the sainthood too. Just looking for new, unconventional, untraditional, and possibly rebellious ways to center Black women. Mm-hmm.
Lovely. I want to congratulate you on your appointment as a Emory Fellow for Social Justice and Art. Congratulations. Yes. um, as you turn back to an educational atmosphere, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your educational background and the role education has played in your practice and in creating work.
Sure. I'm just a geek who paints. That's really what I am. I went to the Art Institute of Atlanta for graphic design and fashion marketing. I then returned to Savannah College of Art and Design to get my undergraduate degree in painting. And oh my gosh, a year ago now, I graduated from Georgia State with my MFA, also in painting. And then the aside, I had begun getting credits over at Spelman for early childhood development. That's when I was trying to like kids, pull myself together to like kids. But I am a lover of education. I really am. I am a researcher. My mom likes to call my bed the library bed because I have books everywhere. It's the bed of the library. Look at the bed of the library because there's literally books everywhere. My friend and I, Theo, were talking about legacy and how, writing in our will, our books as an inheritance. Because, I'm a Generation Xer, so like I come from a generation where books still matter.
Books still matter. I'm here to tell you, books still matter.
We're gonna come up with a movement. Books lives matter. Books do matter. Speaking to, I didn't come from an age of being able to use my phone as a reference point, but just that books hold just this. There's something about the tangible and the touch of a book, and your highlighter as a weapon, and your pencil as the note taker of the additional weaponry. And just being able to have that information. One of the things I'm really so glad about that I fought tooth and nail at returning to get my MFA was that not really understanding that the MFA program is really about language. It really helped me to develop language and really study and really dig deeply about what am I doing and why am I doing it, as opposed to just being cool with just cause. Right? And really allowing me to delve into the thing that I love to do most, which is really read. I'm by and large a poet who paints, right? So I've spent previously in my life, I spent some time as a spoken word poet. And so language is at the foremost important to me. And so language and words and being able to translate that into the visual is a superpower. Is a superpower. And so being in the place of academia is a place of comfort for me. And I'm so proud and very happy to be a part of the fellows at Emory. It's also hard, right? Trying to juggle that along with my art practice, but I'm figuring it out. And I wouldn't give up, the position and the opportunity for not. I really love the professor who they partnered me with, Alex Olson. She's brilliant. She is a feminist studies professor. And so being a part of the class while on Zoom, it's just been amazing. It's really been an amazing opportunity thus far for me, and like being kind of back into the academic world, and oh my God, having to read and research articles to offer up things I feel like the young lady should read, and then also what Alex is offering up for them to read, things that I didn't know, things that I had forgotten. It's really great. It's really great.
Wonderful. I'm so glad that it's going well, and congratulations again. Very
Thank
excited
you.
for you. You are an Atlanta native. What keeps you here? What draws you to the city?
Probably at this point, opportunities. I have my manager, Brian Tolson, is always talking about how do we keep you here? How do we make sure you stay? He's like, the going joke or not is that, most artists leave. Most Atlanta artists leave if you're based here, from here even. Most of us leave. I am a Georgia native. I'm a, ATLian, whatever, Riverdalean, whatever, through and through. Like, I love my city. I love being from here. I love being a representation of this place. And I kind of feel like, kind of like the Amigos or Outkast. Would you expect Outkast to move? Right? Because yeah, like they're the makeup of the city. Would you expect Killer Mike to move? Nah, he's the makeup of the city. You wouldn't expect that from Luda. So from a visual arts perspective, I don't want people to expect that from me. I definitely seek and want to live out opportunities outside of my city, and will continue to do so, and making moves to do so. But I have no intentions of solely being known as an Atlanta artist, just an Atlanta artist. But I love where I'm from, and the root of who I am is a part of the red clay that exists here in the city. Talking with my friend Floyd Hall, we've had discussions. I was about to call Floyd my homeboy. I don't know if that's like academically appropriate. But anyway, like we were having a discussion just about, artists being here, staying here. Why would they stay here? The hodgepodge that the Atlanta artist market is, and, how people, kind of discredit, we serious, we not, we more decor, like all of this language. But my thing is the way that Outkast brought the whole globe to Atlanta. I would like to see that happen in the visual arts here in Atlanta. It's a lot of amazing Atlanta artists, and not just because they're from Atlanta, but because they have something to give and they have something to bring. And it can't just be like, I have to go to New York or to go to California, or Miami or Chicago in order to like validate myself. Why can't I bring folks here? And as hopeful and as optimistic as I am, it doesn't mean I'll never move. That's not the language. I was actually, because if this nation keeps acting the way it does, Japan looking really good. But like, it doesn't mean that I'll stay here for forever. I do have, desire to live elsewhere, if nothing else, just for study purposes. But I love where I'm from. I do. I love Georgia. I love being from here. I love that people still have, this kind of old Southern hospitality ways about them. I love being able to drive down the street and wave at a perfect stranger and they will wave back, right? And I love y'all, and I love sweet potato pie and sweet tea, and just like all of the things that kind of come with the culture of being a Southerner. I love that we're on the Bible Belt, and our obsession with, 200 million churches on every block. Like, I love those things about the South, and I love those things about being from Georgia. I love my family. I love my friends that are here. I love that a lot of Northerners are moving here or moving back, right? Coming from a place of migration where previous generation left, next generation moves back. Like, I love it here. There are a lot of things that bring people to Atlanta, and thus far it has been the music. It has been our laid back culture, and now it is currently Tyler Perry Studios, which Hollywood will reside here for the most part. And so I'm excited to see the opportunity where Atlanta will also take hold of the visual artist market too.
Wonderful. Amazing. Well, you will be directly at the top of the movement, most
Look, I better be.
Yes. Well, those are all the questions that I have for you.
Oh, it's over? No. This was great. This was great.
I didn't want to take up too much of your time.
All right, you're a good interviewer, Taylor. Thank you.
Thank you. You're the easiest person to interview.